We're back. Real Talk Twin Cities. I'm Eric Pirius with Bell Mortgage, along with Cheryl, Donna, and Mark Foreman, CPA Managing Partner of Foreman Earhart. You can get a hold of them or Mark at foremanearhart.com. That's Foreman Air, A-I-R, Hart, H-A-R-T.com. And Mark, we were talking about when is a good time to buy and sell, buy and sell investment properties, and in relations to cash flow. And you had some opinions on that you've shared with us regarding cash flow, and that can kind of be an indicator as to when to sell. Can you share with us what you're talking about there?
Sure. Investment property, as you know, there's two ways to make money. Mm-hmm. There's appreciation of the property, and there's cash flow.
Right.
So you combine those two components in order to determine your rate of return. Mm-hmm. And so I have used as a general rule of thumb, when buying a property, you try to get a 10% rate of return on cash flows when you buy a particular property. Mm-hmm. That's the easy part. The hard part is when do you sell, especially if it's going well.
Right.
And sometimes that's difficult, especially if you get emotionally tied to your particular investment. But I have found and have advised clients that when your rate of return drops below 5%, so what has happened, the property maybe the cash flow has stayed
So what do you
static.
mean? The rents go down? What do you mean?
No, rents stay the same, but the value of the property goes up. So when you're calculating your ratio of your rate of return, you look at the current fair market value compared to your cash flows. And so when that percentage drops down below 5%, it's time to sell.
And
Gotcha.
the benefit to that would be you sell the property, you pull out the equity that you've gained, and then you can take that money and reinvest it in either another property or in some other type of investment.
That's right. So you're trying to be disciplined and not get emotionally tied to your properties, and it usually works out well.
Because that value won't be high forever.
That's right.
Right.
So when it is at that point, if that's your trigger to sell, okay, that makes sense. Or if it doesn't make sense, Mark is happy to explain it to you if you get a hold of them at foremanearhart.com.
And one of the interesting things with investment property is when you are evaluating your rate of return, it's based on the down payment or the investment that you're putting into the property versus the actual purchase price of the property.
That's right. That's one of the beautiful things about investing in real estate is this leverage component, to where you can have a small investment get a higher rate of return because of this leverage component, this ability to borrow money, hopefully at lower interest rates.
So even if we were looking at, if you have $50,000 and you put that into the stock market versus $50,000, you're putting that into a $250,000 property, your gain is going to be higher on the real estate with the same percentage.
That's right.
Because you're leveraging, because you've got a $250,000 investment that only cost you $50,000 to get into it.
That's right. And you can't do that in the stock market.
No, you put in 50, you got 50.
That's right.
Well, now you can all see why it's so important to have a financial planner like Mark on your team. See, this can get pretty confusing. There's a lot of numbers that you need to take into consideration.
That's very true. Also, when selling properties, I had a deal recently where there was 10 family members involved, and it took quite a while to get done. And Mark, I know that you have some thoughts on legacy properties where there's a lot of emotion involved, and some of the ways you can navigate that kind of thing and hopefully maybe sell right.
Yeah, so imagine the situation where you have a family and perhaps own a family cabin where all the siblings remember playing as a child at the lake shore and being part of that cabin, and then all of a sudden now grandma and grandpa are dying, and so what do you do? Do you sell the property? And so if you have several siblings, let's say more than 3, it's very difficult to get consensus. And so, and it's good to, when you have a situation like that, to seek counsel, and not so much for the tax and the legal and those types of things, but maybe working through some of the emotional kind of issues and try to find that common ground. And you could perhaps take a property like that and put it into some type of trust, which would list out the rights and responsibilities of each party, and then you could fund that trust with some money to pay the bills, so that way you're not having to go to the 4 or 5 people, to pay the bills. And then you could, say, okay, this particular person is going to be in charge of administering the trust, and then you also in the trust can say, when do you have access? Each person, maybe there's a calendar or a schedule, and say, okay, first come, first serve, that type of thing. And so there are ways to work through these kinds of things, so you're not forced into some kind of legal dispute or having to sell the property because you can't agree.
Yeah, I actually have a situation just like that where the parents died, the property went to 3 siblings. One sibling wanted to be bought out, so that was fine. The other 2 owned it, and then one of those siblings died. And then he was married, and he had a daughter from a previous marriage. So now the ownership was one sibling, a widow, and a daughter from a previous marriage. And the sibling, she can afford to keep and manage the property, but the other 2 parties, they don't have any money to do that. And you take a look at how long does it take to sell a property over $1 million that's, cabin type beautiful setting, but it's really straining all of their relationships. And the thing I never thought about is I work with probate attorneys quite a bit, but it's really reassuring to know that there's somebody like Mark out there in the background that can help guide them financially on what is the right thing to do for them.
Mm-hmm.
So we really want to encourage you to reach out to Mark Foreman of Foreman Earhart, and you can reach him at his website, or you can also get a hold of him through realtalktwincities.com.
Mark, recently we had, who do we have on here that was talking about the mortgage interest exclusion going away? Was the St. Paul
Oh, that was
president,
the Minnesota Area Association of Realtors.
And they're talking about the mortgage interest write-offs going away. Have you heard anything about that, or is that on your radar at all?
Home ownership in this country is I think, one of the few things that has bipartisan support in Congress.
Mm-hmm.
I think both sides of the aisle recognize that home ownership is a fundamental good thing in this country. And so I don't see the mortgage interest deduction or the exclusion going away. They might play around with the numbers a little, but I really don't see that going away.
Yeah, and in talking to Christine Berger when she was here discussing that with us, the one thing that was interesting is the legislators were only talking about eliminating that deduction for primary residences. So if you owned investment property, you would still be able to deduct the mortgage interest, which is, again, one of the advantages to owning investment property because of the tax deductions that you can take as well, which factor into your rate of return.
So rent and have a bunch of investment properties.
That's all you need.
You buy my house.
Seems counterintuitive.
Yeah. You buy my house, I'll buy your house. Right?
Yeah, we'll rent from each other.
Yes, exactly. Everything will become an investment property, no more primary
It just
residences.
seems a little backwards.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, there hasn't been a lot of discussion like that
yeah.
recently.
Well, I hope they stop talking about it because I'm getting really tired of worrying.
I know you went to your tax conference recently. Any other pending changes or items of note that you got from that seminar?
Well, there was a lot of discussion about the America with Disabilities, or the Obamacare.
Obamacare, sure.
And so many components of that, and it's intertwined with the Internal Revenue Code.
Okay.
So there's a lot of discussion how you have a health care bill that is somehow intertwined with the Internal Revenue Service, which is very interesting.
Yeah, I'll say.
So there's been some regulations that have recently been issued by the Internal Revenue Service where the penalties that could potentially be imposed, which is paid through your income tax returns, will not be pursued in the same collection methodologies like regular income tax. So isn't that interesting?
So you might not, if you don't pay if you don't sign up for Obamacare, you're not going to get a lien levy seizure take your house letter from the IRS.
Exactly, for that component, for that particular piece. So I thought that was interesting.
So kind. Wow. Okay. Well,
I'm waiting for it to start impacting mortgages where people can't get a loan because they don't have insurance or they didn't pay their fine.
so it is interesting that because some bureaucracy has to enforce or keep track of or assess. How do you make these determinations? And that's the IRS in this case, right, Mark?
That's right.
So if folks want to get a hold of you, how can they do that, Mark?
Our office is located in Bloomington.
Mhm.
Our phone number is 952-948-1844. And they can also reach us through our website, foremanearhart.com, or my email, which is mforeman@foremanearhart.com.
Perfect.